The Bitcoin halving is simply not priced in. If you look at these charts, every 4 years, we tend to see fantastic growth in Bitcoin's price action many months after the halving. That has been the case in 2020, 2016, 2012, and it's also going to be the case in this cycle as well. So we're going to be talking about the implications of the halving on this Bitcoin price. So subscribe to the channel for more videos like this in the future. Like this video if you enjoy content like this going forward, then let's dive right into it. So Bitcoin tends to develop major resistance at old all-time highs, and this tends to be a key thing in Bitcoin's cycles, where we tend to reaccumulate just below those old all-time highs before breaking into a parabolic phase of the cycle. You can see that this is where we see a lot of reaccumulation in 2016, lots of reaccumulation and slow, gradual upward movement in 2020 as well. And we're seeing an extended reaccumulation range here as well. And this time in this cycle, we're actually seeing that this old all-time high region of resistance is turning into an almost 8-month support right now. So we're developing a reaccumulation range right on old all-time highs. And this is really important because this is and was a point of rejection in the past, but it's now acting as a new support. And it's this support that's going to launch price into a fantastic uptrend. Really important to note that these are non-logarithmic charts, and this is actually a log chart, so it's not going to be the case that we rally to however much, because also we have to take into account diminishing returns across cycles. So we are going to see less return in this cycle versus previous cycles. That's just natural maturation in the cycles. We tend to see lesser and lesser profit yield when we see post-halving exponential rallies to new all-time highs and beyond. However, it's still going to be a pretty phenomenal cycle nonetheless. And when we look at post-halving reaccumulation phases, this one has been the longest one ever. In fact, 185 days at this point is how much we've been reaccumulating and consolidating in the post-halving period. In fact, in 2020, it took 160 days after the halving to see a breakout into the parabolic phase of the cycle. So we're still in this reaccumulation phase. It's extending by 3 weeks or so. And once we've finally broken out from this reaccumulation phase, we will simply transition into the parabolic phase of the cycle. We've recently reclaimed the range low as support once again, and we're rallying towards the top of this range. It just needs to break that multi-month downtrend that we're seeing, and it's currently in the process of trying to negotiate a breakout beyond there. But generally speaking, what we've been seeing over the past few months is rallying from range low to range high, range low to range high, and it's been doing that consistently, even also downside deviating below the range low into some bargain buying opportunities. That's essentially what these orange circles represent. We tend to see similar downside deviations into bargain zones occur across the cycle. So this isn't out of the ordinary, although we've seen that rather than in wicking fashion, we've seen lots of candle-bodied downside deviation into this region. But we've managed to reclaim the range low as support, and now we're rallying towards the top of this range. And once we get a weekly close above this range high here, that's going to be a really important confirmation signal for actually breaking out to new all-time highs and finally rallying into the parabolic phase of the cycle. So this is an extended range, of course, based on history, but nonetheless, the technicalities behind this range remain the same, and that is simply that we are still in the reaccumulation phase in preparation for that parabolic phase of the cycle. And this is a good representation of where we are right now. This orange circle essentially represents where we are in the cycle. In 2020 and 2016, generally in and around the halving is when we tend to see retracement and consolidation, and this has been the case across all cycles, especially this one. We've seen retracement, we've seen consolidation, everything in between, and it's slowly becoming time for price to essentially transition into its next phase of the cycle, which is essentially parabolic price action towards the upside. And you can see that this can be quite an impressive few months of uninterrupted upside, really. In 2017, we've seen a lot of upside with very few moments for getting in on the rally on dips. We've seen very few dips in 2017. And very similar in 2020 and 2021, where we just saw price action rally to new all-time highs and only then, after many months, experience a deeper pullback and then experience this sort of distribution range here before we broke down into the bear market. But very few pullbacks occur on the way to parabolic all-time highs. Essentially, there are very few opportunities, so it's really important to, rather than FOMO in and try and look for those opportunities which come very few and far between, really important to be focusing on the reaccumulation phase. It's not called the reaccumulation phase without coincidence. This is really the best time to be reaccumulating before we finally transition into the parabolic phase of the cycle, which is really coming soon. Because if we look at this chart, 160 days after the halving is where Bitcoin broke out into the parabolic phase of the cycle. That was in 2020, and we're already 180 plus days after the halving. So it's overdue. This breakout into the parabolic phase of the cycle is long overdue. And how much more time can we consolidate inside this range without breaking out? So we're really running out of time before we shift gears and shift the tide. And this curling up in price action is a great indicator of how we're seeing the buyers really start to pile in. We've been seeing higher lows for 3 consecutive months now, and just notice that we were seeing lower and lower and lower lows in the previous quarter right over here. So there has been a total shift in dynamic and market psychology here, and we just need to break these old all-time highs essentially before we can transition into the next parabolic phase of the cycle, the next phase. And if you focus on sort of returns after the halving, then obviously this is a tremendous return. Whereas in the pre-halving period, you only really get this sort of return. So pre-halving period, this is the return that you can expect. Post-halving period, well, this is the return that you can expect, which just showcases to us that pre-halving returns simply are lesser than post-halving returns. In post-halving returns, many months after the halving, we tend to see fantastic return on investment. So the same thing has occurred in the 2020 cycle. Pre-halving returns are decent as well, but only after the halving where we see phenomenal returns take place. And it's going to be the same thing in this cycle here. Although we've had a phenomenal pre-halving period, still there's going to be a lot of upside left ahead for Bitcoin to enjoy in the future. But in terms of this upside, it's really important to understand that as with maturation in the cycles, we simply see a diminishing in the return of this parabolic rallying to new all-time highs. So there is a diminishing, and that diminishing is also going to continue even in this cycle compared to what we've seen in the previous 2 cycles. So still really exponential price action, really impressive price action to enjoy in the parabolic phase of the cycle. However, it is going to be a diminished return in terms of what we've seen in the past. So it's not going to be copy paste like this. Maybe we get half of that, and that would still be very decent. In fact, it would still get us into the 100k plus regions. But it's really important to just be level-headed about these cycles and not kid ourselves that, well, we're going to always have these sort of returns in the future. But if you were to do that in the previous cycle, then you'd be expecting much higher prices, and we actually topped out at 69k. So it's better to be conservative rather than overly optimistic and hopeful, and base our decision making on the cool, calm, collected nature of the cool facts that reside in the chart right over here. So a diminishing cycle is expected, but nonetheless, it's going to be an exciting one, and we really are on the cusp of transitioning from the reaccumulation phase into the parabolic phase of the cycle, and we don't have too much time left. It's really starting to be crunch time as we transition out of this reaccumulation phase into the parabolic phase of the cycle. If you want to tune in to data science level-headed insights, check out my free newsletter in the link in the description down below. You can sign up there for Monday, Wednesday, and Friday newsletters about Bitcoin and also altcoins, but also subscribe to the channel for more videos like this in the future. Like this video if you enjoy content like this going forward. I'm Rekt Capital, and I'll speak to you in the next one. Speak to you soon.